Hello? It's not working. It's not working? Ah. Hello? 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 No? Hello? Number 4? Hello, please. Everyone have a seat. We're going to start the session in 1 minute. Oh, yeah, yeah. You can already come in the panel if you want. Oh, no, we're going to...
Just sit here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to explain that it's only 25 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to explain a little bit more? Then, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Please have a seat.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming along at this rather in-betweeny time. So I hope you didn't rush your supper, and alternatively, I hope you're not starving hungry. We're going to show a 25-minute edit of We Don't Do Charity, and then I'm delighted that we've got a panel of some of the most dynamic women operating in the sector, as well as members of the production team for a lovely panel discussion afterwards. So thank you very much for coming and enjoy the film.
Charity is big business. Across the world, people and governments donate billions to help alleviate poverty, hunger, and deprivation. When we give to charity, it makes us feel good. We like to feel we're making a difference. But what if our charity does more harm than good? Emergency aid during wars and disasters will always be needed. But many question if charity is the right way to help in the long term. A growing movement of non-profits, social entrepreneurs, and civil society organizations are rejecting charity in favor of dignity, sustainability, and locally led development. They are leading the fight to put local communities back in control of their own destinies and say goodbye to the humiliation of handouts. This is their story. Gunj is a non-profit organization serving thousands of rural villages in India from its base in Delhi. Led by Anshu Gupta, Gunj has developed a powerful system to empower vulnerable communities and help them take control of their futures with dignity.
This beautiful concept and idea came up, which is now called Cloth for Work. It's a symbolic name. The whole idea is that the people decide, the people take ownership, the people decide what is that they need to work on. So a cluster of village or a cluster of people or the people of the village decide that they need a road. Someone says, I need to dig a well. Someone says, I need to clean the pond. And then after a few days of work, they are rewarded in kind. Also, it actually dignifies the entire act of giving. I mean, if you give a shirt or a trouser to someone and say, tomorrow you go to that person and say that this shirt belongs to me, the person has no option but to accept and say that yes, it is yours. And then the same person actually works on the village road and create a road or clean a pond. And you go tomorrow and say that this shirt belongs to me. The person will say that yes, it is yours, it might be yours, but I've earned it. So that language changes, that entire narration changes in this act, and the giving becomes very dignified, and there is a lot of self-respect, there's a lot of dignity.
All human beings want dignified employment. They want a way to earn a living for themselves and their families. Nobody wants handouts. It's not in human nature, in my opinion, to just sit there and wait for a handout from the West or from your government or from wherever. I think there is a satisfaction that human beings get and need in being able to earn their own income and having the dignity that gives it.
So in any case, I mean, the charity does not solve any problem, and the people who have so much of self-respect should not become the victim of charity. That's the most important part. They are already, the victim of poverty, as a lot of people say, but they should not become the victim of charity, because that is something which is our doing, and it should not happen.
The idea that somebody turns up and gives them something because they're poor simply reinforces their status and their self-image and impacts on their dignity. So if you turn up and they feel shame from that, they feel ashamed that somebody is having to do that for them because they are helpless.
And when shame is linked to needs, so if I have no housing, if I can't feed my children, if I have no purpose in my life, if I don't feel good about myself as a human being, then shame is chronic and bound in it with everything else. And then eventually people get to a point where, well, what is the point? Nothing ever changes in my life. No matter how hard I've tried, I get pushed back again, and then they give up.
Here in Wale Wale, northern Ghana, food insecurity and hunger are a fact of life for many families during the dry or lean season. In the past, food aid was sent to the north and handed out to villages. But now instead, local community initiatives like SEAL, the Center for Ecological Agriculture and Livelihoods, work with in-depth local knowledge and expertise to help smallholder farmers by running learning programs to increase crop production and enrich the soil, using methods which don't rely on costly chemical fertilizers.
My name is Isifu Suleimana. I'm the team leader of SEAL, which is a Center for Ecological Agriculture and Livelihood. We are a local NGO, or better still, you can say social enterprises. What we do basically is to help smallholder farmers to improve their agricultural systems, improve ways that they can improve their incomes, and also promote communal harmony. One of our projects is Solvoz. And Solvoz here means supporting local innovations for food and nutritional security. It is simple looking at development within instead of development that is being brought from outside.
Solvoz has done a whole lot of support in our communities. We are into 4 communities, and in these 4 communities, we have women have been able to come out with innovations. And among these innovations, a woman came out with her innovation, whereby she used cereal with sweet potato, then and legumes to prepare a nutritious food for people. According to her, she was doing it for her family during the lean season. So when we visited the committee, she introduced it to us, and we said, oh, let's look at it. And I'm telling you, it's doing a wonderful job.
Yura adibono apana kan yi kpobgo yo anti pili sen kan ngra anyala diranya parantama kum mon sabo ibisi din nane kaji am komna no abutake ka rera titama ne nanga anwa ma do asuba kenen ka banyu wontangi bi ki mon sama de ne paba kanda ma asa innange yi ku do asuba yi ko ane ka bisuma yun take ka kyan sukuro la na bati para la kanya wonta dibu ka badi so man ko ara ama ka ngon kana za anyi gya non tu kunyu ka bati na anya sa anya hama zu kama yene to in yira nya la ahbela nda jara ane nningna en yinna ni nyar ko ko ngore in sukuru bisi bay bor bukan ne tonda bay bor person ne tonda so anda den data si man nga ka ari yina palana ma ka.
Now she's using it as business. Something that she started as food for her family has now become business for her, and she's earning additional income to support the family.
Sidai is a social enterprise helping pastoralists in Kenya to keep their livestock healthy and productive, therefore a reliable source for both food and income. As a for-profit organization, Sidai claims to provide a more sustainable structure than donor funding.
Well, I've come from a background as a chief executive of an NGO, and I've worked for over 40 years in East Africa, in Kenya and Ethiopia as well. And my absolute passion is really supporting livestock keepers to improve their lives through improving the productivity and profitability of their livestock. Livestock are a great asset for farmers in Africa. They're, for many people, particularly pastoralists, obviously, they depend on them wholly for their livelihood. And so if you can improve their production through reducing mortality, for example, through vaccination, simple things, then you can really transform people's lives. And I can see the power of simple improvements in changing the lives of very poor people. Because what you find is that a lot of people who maybe don't have much money, they can't afford to educate their children, may have maybe 20, 30 goats, for example, but they're not getting the best out of those animals, and they're dying. Mortality rates can be very high, 30, 40%, and all that is unnecessary, all that wastage. Through simple improvements, then productivity can improve, and people can make money from their livestock and improve their lives on the back of that.
Not far outside Kampala, Uganda, lies a sizable, lush vegetable garden. It's where a young and successful businessman has his base, and where he welcomes children and teenagers to learn about the potential and possibilities of horticulture, agriculture, and growing food for both profit and food security.
By name, I'm Joseph Male. Joseph Male, I'm from the central region here, Uganda, but I'm a passionate grower, and I'm the founder and director of Avail Group Limited, which is an agriculture input supply company. A lot of our work is centered at innovation and empowerment. So when I decided to start agriculture, I realized there were many other young people going through a similar or worse situation than I was going through. But also I realized that there is a very high rate of youth unemployment. So to kind of make a difference, I thought it would be easier through where agriculture supports a lot of livelihoods. And my work has been really centered so much at changing the face of agriculture, especially the young people, but also showing people that it is possible to live really productively through agriculture. As a person, I believe so much into skills development because of my values. I don't believe in being this skilled myself with the knowledge I have for agriculture, and I keep it to myself. That is, it doesn't make sense at all for me. So the easier way I can support and empower others is by training, sharing the skill I have to them.
In some areas of Nairobi, Kenya, unemployment, robbery, and substance misuse are big issues, especially among young people who have little hope of a bright future. The slum areas on the edge of the capital are troubled places with rampant crime. Local man Ben Gori is determined to do what he can by offering youngsters the chance of an apprenticeship, which could lead to future job opportunities.
I'm Ben Gori. I'm the co-founder actually, the initiator of Jitole. Yes, I run Jitole, whereby I mobilize technicians in the business community who are doing various TVET courses, technical and vocational courses, whereby we link them with the needy youth, vulnerable youths who are interested in learning these skills so that they can earn a living through these skills.
My name is Shadrach Oudo. I have trained here for 1 year, and so far I have learned a lot of things. It has helped me to avoid bad companies like robbery, drug abuse, and a lot of things.
So I saw the need to engage these boys to help them get the knowledge, and some of them are coming from very poor background. So we saw the need to help them so that they can help themselves in the future. You know, when you help one person, he can be a pillar to other people.
Also, crime rate is very high, and this is attributed to most of unemployment that is facing the youth. And that is why we are really finding it so much in need to really come in as a community to also help the youth in terms of informal training.
If local organizations and social entrepreneurs are so efficient and sustainable, what could the big international charities be doing differently? Many think global aid organizations can still make an important contribution, but their role needs to be redefined. And some leading voices are even calling for radical change.
This is the reality of what happens. Majority of the resources that is allocated for every dollar USAID gives or every pound the British government gives, majority of the money really stays in the hands of the UN and the NGOs themselves, and very little comes into the hands of the communities.
I think it's a systems failure, and I think what has happened is that we've created an industry. So the aid itself, the whole aid infrastructure is an industry. You have key players in that industry, mostly NGOs, etc., and they've built a certain relationship with local organizations. Those relationships are not necessarily equitable. Those relationships, there's a lot of power dynamics in those relationships because, of course, if I'm bringing resources, I have a certain power to dictate to you how those resources should be spent. So over the years, what has happened is that this system, we've created a leaking basket. So there's been a lot of money that's pumped into this whole aid system, but we're not seeing the results that we want because a lot of the projects that are being done are not conceptualized or by those who are actually going to benefit from it.
When you receive a project as a local organization in Nepal and a crisis has happened, the project has already been approved and designed in another country. The budget has already been designed in another country, and guess what? You're given no visibility of any. You're told a $5 million project hypothetically has been funded by USAID, and you're told implement $200,000 of it. That's all out of the $5 million. The rest is taken for all this infrastructure, staffing costs, cars, offices, all of these things, travel, all of that. Maybe they'll have 3-4 partners, each getting $200,000, but majority of the money, at least 60-70% is used for staff and office expenditure, operational expenses. So what actually gets into the hands of the communities, and then now local organization gets that $200,000, they're told spend almost no money, even though they're the ones who are directly interacting with the communities, on your staff and office costs. No money. So you basically are subsidizing and working for these international actors for free.
There are efforts being made at the moment. There's talk about localizing aid. And, you know, at the best end, that means ensuring more and more money skips the middleman. And there's a hell of a lot of middlemen in international development. And all the major agencies are still housed in the north, and trying to be moving south over the last 20 years. It kind of seems to have stalled a bit. So, yeah, this is where leadership in the international development community is necessary to really push the hundreds of thousands of dollars, the millions of dollars every year into the hands of southern organizations.
It's about misaligned incentives, right? So let's say an international organization that is based in the global north, their organizational mandate is to, say, raise their income, get more money, or scale up their programs, or have more projects, or expand their work in more countries. And within these organizations, you've got the CEO, the directors, the managers, who are measured in their performance by how well they achieve these organizational mandates. And so it feeds into this sort of like humanitarian business, humanitarian industry that sort of like just ever expands without really taking into account what the preferences are of local people and communities.
A lot of us who are on this side of the fence, who are part of these global advocacy groups like Shift the Power, the decolonizing aid agenda, the localization agenda. I mean, I think localization, I have an issue with the word itself, but I mean, for the lack of a better word, right? More like Southern leadership agenda. We have to continue also making our case.
And then one of the biggest gap is that we often give what we have. We don't give what people need. Right? So I'm not doubting on intentions of people. Right? I mean, whatever we are giving with good intentions. But it's completely different what people need.
We all know examples of pork tins that were brought into Islamic countries and then being upset that you give food but it's not being used, but it's totally inappropriate. It's not good enough to do good. You have to do it in the right and an appropriate way. Just going out there and bringing your stuff, it's well-intended charity, but it's actually clothing all the warehouses of the aid agencies that actually bringing in other goods that actually might be more appropriate. The other thing what's often happening is that we're bringing in a lot of goods, but then we might be destroying local markets.
It's all this top-down approach where I will decide what is the problem and I will decide what is the solution. For us, maybe we want to see a better world. That's why we are going to those people. Who am I to impose my agenda? Who am I to say that this is the problem? Who am I to say that this is the solution? Who am I to say that this is how it can be solved?
This is why it's important that people who are part of their communities, people who are in their communities, are the ones making the decision and calling the shots, because it's not just about expertise, but it's about people's values. It's about what they want their society or their community to be. It's about their own destinies.
We need to have a mindset shift. So on both sides, I think on the global south side, we need to move away from this dependency, excessive dependency. Unfortunately, the system has caused a certain dependency in mentality where we think that if we don't get help from outside, we can't do anything for ourselves, which is wrong. There's so much premium put on money instead of other assets, but we have other assets. Communities have assets. You know, they have resources, they have technical expertise, they have networks, they have their own assets. It may not be money, but they also have their. So how do we recognize that? So that mindset shift on the global south and the global north, also a mindset shift, and to see that this is a partnership and not just a funding relationship. We are not doing development as charity anymore. It's now a co-investment relationship. So things have transitioned. We started as charity, which was okay, but you know, right now, in order for us to be mutually on a fair and equitable, mutually respectful kind of paradigm, we look at ourselves as co-investors.
Some of the if you like, criticism, some of the real questioning of what is the role of international NGOs, certainly at a time like this, has helped, and I'm talking broadly, the sector, to reevaluate. Are they part of the problem or part of the solution?
I believe there's change will come, change will definitely come ultimately, but I think that we all need to work together more. So the Southern kind of collaboration needs to be much more stronger between Global South actors in Africa, Asia, in Latin America. We need to connect more and work together to push this agenda.
So I think the time has come that we change the way we are working on issues, because a whole lot of us do want to become a part of the solutions. I think it is not happening because we are not listening to people. Because we are not listening, because we are not understanding that these are people are taking these extreme steps, because we are not standing with people, because we are not listening, we are not understanding the core issues, we are not trying to solve those core issues. We've just taken it for granted. If you listen to people, and as I'm saying that if you make them stakeholders, things will change, and the same resources will be much more useful, because what we need to understand that doing good is a collective responsibility, because at the end of the day we all want to live in a much better world.
This is amazing.
Well, sorry about the tiny technical hitch at the start of that. I think I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panel. And they'll say a few words about themselves because they know themselves best. We'll start at the end with Claire Barnhoorn from Solvoz. Claire.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm the founder and CEO of Solvoz. I used to be a humanitarian aid worker for many years with Doctors Without Borders and others. And I founded Solvoz, which is a digital procurement solution to localize and create more efficiency in our supply chains.
And David, next to me, David Campbell.
Well, I'm the director of the film, and I'm her husband.
Is that it? well, Professor Nikki Clark here, Banks, sorry.
Only spent the last week with her.
But she definitely is a professor, and she definitely is from the University of Manchester.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki. I'm a professor at the University of Manchester, and after 10 years of researching a system that wants to change but cannot change, I came together with my very good friend Chibwe Masabo Henry to launch One World Together, a social enterprise that is getting long-term, predictable and unrestricted funding directly to communities.
And next along, we have Ayesha Farrah from Comic Relief.
Yep, Ayesha. My name is Ayesha. I work for Comic Relief, those guys that make people laugh. Unfortunately for you, I don't, sorry. But we use the power of humour to raise funds, and that's the comic versus the relief bit. And I work on our flagship programme called Shifting the Power, that looks at directly funding local organisations, co-funded with the UK government, and I look after the communications and advocacy of that programme.
And last but not least, he might be familiar to some of you, is Alan Braithwaite.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alan Braithwaite. Excuse me. I caused this thing to be made having joined Catalyst in the middle of 2020. So I've been around Catalyst for a long time. It's totally consistent what we've done with the Catalyst message.
Thank you very much. It's not often people stick to the brief of making it, short. Let's start with you, David. Husband. What inspired you to make the film in the first place?
Him. Well, it was quite a long time ago now, wasn't it? 2018, 2019. Alan and I were working on the project, and we came across this guy, Ayesha, who you saw on the screen there. And I went to see Ayesha in Delhi to start working with him on this project. And I started talking about charity work, and he said, "Stop. Don't talk to me about charity." And at that point, I had a view of humanitarian aid, charitable work, like lots of people. You give your money, and they give the money to the poor. They give food to the poor. And I didn't understand how any of this worked, or how inappropriate my views and ideas were. So that set us on a journey, making the documentary. We thought, well, let's look into this. What's this all about? Are we that wrong about things? What are we doing wrong? And we found out about, we were trashing people's dignity. We were treating people badly. We just weren't helping, and we were making a lot of the problems worse. So, Charles Kojo Van Dyke, who was a huge influence on the work that we've been doing, who you saw, said we need a mind shift. And that's what I hope this documentary does, is help people make that mind shift from an almost racist position. You think people are poor, and you call them poor people, and you think they're less than you. You think they're intelligent, lively, vibrant people who are living good lives. They just lack something. Money might be the problem, or opportunity might be the problem. They're just like you and me. There is no difference. And that was hard to get hold of, because since TV was invented, we've been fed these images. We have developed this narrative in our minds about what aid is, what charity is, and what poor people are. And we need to rethink all that. We just need to wipe the slate clean. And I'm hoping that this documentary contributes towards that mind shift.
Well, it might be good as well to ask Alan, what do you want people to think about? What do you want this film to do?
Well, I hope it brings people up short if they haven't had those thoughts before. I think we're preaching to a converted audience here, but actually we want to get this message right out, take it around universities, promote the discussion, because not only is it demeaning of people's dignity, it's very often, as we heard from the clip, and there's a 90-minute documentary behind this, so you need to watch the whole thing, please. That it's actually incredibly inefficient, and that's my background. My background is business management. Master of the London Business School, developed my own 50-person business specializing in international consulting, supply chain logistics. It's how I've been able to fund this. But actually, I recognize inefficiency when I see it. And the entire system is inefficient. And it has to be called out. And I'm an old geezer, so I actually don't care if people hate me. Because they can go to hell. Because if we can call it out and we can get that message across, then just maybe people will wake up. People are starting to, but just maybe they'll wake up. I mean, it's $450 billion a year in international aid and development. The grand bargain calls for 25% of that to hit the ground. Dagon asserts from her statistics that no more than 3% is hitting the ground. It's a scandal.
Well, you've mentioned calling out, Alan. Ayesha, we've spoken before about the fact that the aid and development sector had to have a period of self-reflection over the past sort of 4 or 5 years. Do you want to sort of take us through that?
Yeah, I mean, COVID really exposed the injustices that were happening, you know, and really led to this mistrust with the global south. I mean, we were hoarding vaccine and the intellectual property of that whilst also saying, leave no one behind. You know, that led to a deep mistrust with our partners in the global south. George Floyd, you know, the death, or I'd like to say the murder of George Floyd, when he said, you know, I can't breathe, really exposed a system that couldn't breathe, you know, a system that really, which also forced us to look inwards and beyond DEIB and look at white saviorism and exposed organizations who were tokenistic in their approach, and led to this quiet movement that erupted, Shift the Power movement, that a lot of the people in the film and some of us on the panel are a part of, that brings actors from students to philanthropists to local actors who really came together and said there is a systemic failure here. The system is failing and we need to do better and we can do better. And you know, development needs to be done with the global south, not to them. So yeah, I'll stop there so others can speak.
Well, no, that's a really good place because it leads so neatly onto Nikki's position. We had Nikki, when you first saw the documentary, you immediately reached out, didn't you, and said, "Oh, this resonates so much with what you're doing." So perhaps you'd like to share exactly what it is you're doing.
Okay, well, let me first start by saying I think this is such an important film with such an important role to play at this particular moment of time. As Alan said, we're all in good company here. We all know the problems that we have in a system that doesn't work for communities. But outside of these rooms, outside of these kind of industries, people don't know that. In the global north, we have been kind of told by a very well-honed, very well kind of resourced charity sector that charity is the way that we can do good in the world, even if it's not working for the people that we think it is. So this knowledge then, and this insight, which isn't told through our voices, but showing the real power that communities can have, this is the message that we need to get that message further out. It's that knowledge that brings power. But that power and that knowledge also needs an alternative way to support the causes that we think that we're wanting to support in the world. And that's what we're trying to build at One World Together. I was also part of the systems change world in development cooperation. I met my co-founder Chibwe in a social lab. I came with the academic experience and the research and this insight that despite asking the same questions over and over again, we weren't seeing any different outcomes. Chibwe had worked in the sector, managing multi-million-pound portfolios for major donors. She saw the noise that the sector creates that pulls communities away from the work that they want to be doing. So to both of us, we asked, what would it take to actually do this right and to get funding directly to communities? And we decided that we had to look away from the donors, away from the NGOs, and try and build an entirely new system, a transformative system. Not tweak the one we've got, but start again and try and mobilize a new global community of citizens and a new form of citizen-led philanthropy. So what we do is incredibly simple. We are building a movement around micro-donations at scale, making it affordable so everyone, regardless of whether they can give £1, £10, £1 million, can all lean in and provide funds that we then pool and give to our partners, very community-rooted partners, in the UK, Kenya, and Zambia. And hopefully, as we get bigger, all over the world. So we're trying to unite people behind the development that all of us want to see. We just don't know yet that it doesn't exist.
Would you like to give a couple of examples of who you're partnering with?
Absolutely. So we are funding 4 amazing partners. 2 are social movements. So they're movements by and for low-income communities, one in Manchester and one in Kenya. And then there's 2 more professional organisations, both working in youth employment and skills training and doing amazing things. I think one example that resonates really strongly with what Degan was saying about these massive multi-million-pound projects not funding infrastructure and operational costs at the local level. You can see really well in our partners in Zambia. So we gave them a very small starter grant of £1,500, which in this room probably seems like absolutely nothing. But this came at a time where Zambia was going through 17-hour power cuts because they're dependent on hydroelectricity, and this chronic drought was lasting longer and longer. So they bought a solar panel. So they weren't able to do any work in the office whatsoever. So all of the kind of currency of development, the reporting, the fundraising, the communications, the team building, the training, none of that could go on. This £1,500 allowed them to buy a solar panel, and the office was up and running again overnight. And we said to them, surely your other bigger funds would have allowed you to buy a solar panel. And Lwanga said, no, that's not how it works. It should, but they only fund us to run projects because they expect that all of those other things are running and operational, but they're not if you don't fund them. So that's just one example. There's also really human examples of the way very small amounts of funds can really deepen the impact of existing programs. Our partners say that sort of our unrestricted funding is 5 times more powerful than project-based funding because they can use it to fill in gaps. They can make a kind of a bare minimum project into a much bigger project. So in Kenya, it's about vocational training, giving skills for employment, but the flexible funding allows them to accompany that with mental health support for young people from really disadvantaged background, because they know that training alone is never enough to get people into jobs that they can stay in. You need to give a lot more wraparound support. So it gives them the freedom to do the best that they can within their communities.
That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing those. Claire, you've been quiet for too long. And Nikki was talking about efficiency and impact that even small tweaks can make. But I think Solvoz is probably looking at bigger tweaks, but perhaps you can share with exactly what impact you can have in joining up the dots procurement-wise.
Yeah, before people leave the room, procurement is actually quite a sexy subject. Well, most people will zone out now. In the movie, you've heard that it's quite an industry, and I agree on that one. And this industry, and I'm talking now about the humanitarian side of development aid, 75% of this industry is spent in their supply chains. And I let that sink in, because every euro that we send to Congo or to Gaza, 75% is spent in supply chains. And these supply chains are very international, so we hardly source locally. The other thing is there's a lot of inefficiencies on the way we're trying to find suppliers globally, and that's, when knowing what you're seeing and that you can try to solve it, that's why we started to found Solvoz. So it's an e-procurement platform supporting any small actor up to large actors to source more efficiently and effectively. We save organizations roughly 30% of their budget just by using the technology and connecting any actor to hundreds and thousands of suppliers globally to get better quotes, getting lower prices, but also increase the quality of the items that you're procuring. So that's the what, but why we're doing it is that technology can equip any small organization. Going back to your example with the solar panel, there's a lot of hesitance to give this organization maybe $1 million, which an international aid agency easily gets. And that's because of a trust. We are afraid that they're misusing the funds. We don't have visibility on how they're spending their funds, but now you know that 75% is spent on procurement. So having a trust mechanism for anybody in the sector that assures that even the smallest organizations can procure with technology, like a flagship as if they're the World Food Programme, really creates a trust mechanism between funders or those that provide funds, whether it's a big international funder or a government, up to a small person in the room giving $1. If you have a trustworthy system that creates fair markets, that's why we founded Solvoz.
You also, we've chatted about it before, spoken about the problems of bringing in equipment from Europe into a country that hasn't sourced that. It affects the longevity of them because of a spare part shortage or incompatibility. What's your experience of that, and how are you sorting that?
So there's a lot of issues. I have a gazillion stories, so I'll try to keep it short. But at the start of the recession in Venezuela, there were loads and loads of containers of medical equipment sent into Venezuela. but they have a different power system. So if you don't bring the right plug, you don't have the right equipment. And it's these really small items, small things you need to know at the procurement stage to have the right specifications. So that's one answer. And I had 2 other examples I totally forgot now.
Was there something about baby incubators?
Yeah, so if you're procuring an incubator, it needs to come with spare parts because you know you need to replace the bulb. So that's also one of the components we're doing with our foundation, making sure you have all the information at hand to source and procure responsibly. So if you're after an incubator, you have to know if there's power available. If there's no power, then please go to another solution or try to find something else, or make sure that you have the solar panel to have the power to equip a incubator. The other question is, all right, you have power, does it run 24/7? Otherwise the poor kid will still die in your incubator. But then, is there a spare part? Because after 3 months you have to replace the bulb, otherwise the incubator is standing in the corner. And these kind of things we see constantly. And that is why I try to convince people that it's at the procurement stage when you can make it more sustainable and longer durable in the long run. Another example is on solar lanterns. Just to know that UNHCR and IOM combined procure 5 million solar lanterns annually. And they set up a lot of sustainability projects or greening the sector. Then they might set up a repair shop and training local entrepreneurs to set up doing the repairs of solar lanterns. But at the same time, if you look at the specifications of procurement of these 5 million solar lanterns, nowhere it's written it should be a repairable solar lantern. So if we don't add repairability at the procurement stage, we're not going to make any big difference.
Ayesha, following on from what Claire was saying about how to make the system more efficient and also how to support local communities, what does that look like with you, Comic Relief, and Shift the Power?
Yeah, so Shifting the Power is a 10-year program at Comic Relief. It's our flagship, as I said, and it's co-funded with the UK government. It looks to directly fund local organisations in Malawi, Ghana and Zambia over 10 years. So it's not just our biggest funded programme, it's our longest one as well. And it really speaks to that problem that Degan spoke about in the film about, funding going, less than 3% of funding going to making it to the people. I mean, there's organisations there's NGOs in Uganda who have more money than the government. That's an issue, as well as a bit of a joke. But, it's really all about directly funding these organisations. So they have the power to decide where their money goes. And so over the next 10 years, the first 2 years from 2020 to 2022 was spent on just the delivery and the design of this. So there wasn't any local partners. And now we're in the implementation stage. But we're really anchored by our local partners and principles. So one of them is being aware of our power. As a funder, you have different forms of power. And are we best placed to make the decisions when it comes to where the money goes? No. So we work with funded reference groups when we're doing funding calls, not just on this program, but in all our other funding. And we use and work with experts by experience and people with lived experience because they know the issues that we're ultimately trying to fund. That's one way we do it. We're trying to be transparent with our comms. So when we don't give funding to an organisation, we need to show our working out and why they haven't received that funding. They've spent a lot of labour and love into that application. Being inclusive in our design and our application process, we've heard so many stories of organisations, small organisations, who have exhausted all their energy in a 75-page paper to tell you why you should fund them, only for you to say no. What questions actually mattered? What did you need? And we've learnt from our local partners because they said, well, we're not doing this. We're doing it very differently. We're actually going to invite our grassroots organisations to apply by video and via WhatsApp. And that was much more inclusive, and they were meeting people where they are. And disappointing people and breaking and continuing a trust with their local communities. But also just building trust and the process and at the essence and the heart of this program is also building trust, genuine partnerships, shifting not just funding and money, which is basically power, but decision making to our local partners, because they are ultimately the experts and are closest to the issues. We don't tell our local organizations what they should fund, and we also allow flexible funding for them to decide, actually, do we need to focus on organizational strengthening in Q2 or Q3 as opposed to getting money to just a specific program. So whilst they're delivering the funding, they're also building their organizations. And a really great example, we visited Malawi last year, and one of the first funds that our local organizations funded was called the Catalyst Fund, and it was all about just getting small grassroots organizations to stand up on their feet, because for whatever reason they weren't even able to attract funders. And there was this really small organization who was doing great things but just couldn't get funding from anywhere because they couldn't afford to register their organization. So the £3,000 that our anchor partners, our local organizations, funded them, meant that once that Catalyst Fund was done, they started attracting funding of 125 USD from African funders in the continent. So you can see a little goes a very long way. And is a great example of funding that isn't restrictive and is flexible, and the power that does, and the dignity and the trust that also creates in turn. So, yeah.
Did you want to add something, Alan?
Yeah, I did. People, certainly in the white wealthy north, if you can call it that, look at the problem as overwhelming. There's 700 million people in the world on less than, I think it's $2.14 per day, as per the World Bank. There's about 3 billion on 365. So poverty is absolutely endemic. It's terribly easy to think that that's an insoluble problem and too difficult. But actually, what Ayesha's saying and what we've observed is when you're on $2.15 a day, if you can go to $2.50, actually you're wealthy. That transforms your life. And the moment that you've got to that gate, you suddenly realize that you can dare to hope. And I think the thing that we discovered, excuse me, I get emotional about this, was seeing these people daring to hope.
I think that was just evidence of your passion, Alan, and everybody is aware that this is a real legacy for you, isn't it? It's at the end of a fabulous, fabulous career, and I think it's a brilliant return of everything, all your learnings and your career. So I think everybody thanks you for that, definitely. So talking about how it's moving the dial towards maybe more of a blueprint of how things can be done correctly, effectively and efficiently, what would you say? You know, when you're at discussions with your colleagues from other NGOs, what's the one thing you would hope that they would take away, perhaps, from the way things can be done, and the incremental changes, perhaps, that can be started? Ayesha, is there anything that colleagues from other organisations want to have discussions about? Oh, how did you do this? What problems did you come up against? How did you sort it? Nikki or Claire, similarly, it would be really interesting to know how receptive others are.
I think, do you want to go? No, please. I was just going to say that I think some of the challenges is that once you say decolonisation, people's backs against the wall, and there's a defence mechanism. But actually, we're all just trying to make this more equitable, and just encouraging fairness. And I think the gravy train has moved, so it's either get on or it's left. And I think INGOs, I don't think that it's a case of them not having a role in this. They have a massive role to play. But one thing we really want to move away from is working in silos and this attitude of us versus them. Everyone has a role to play. I think there was a really great article, I can't quote who it was, but that was on LinkedIn about shifting power. And he compared it to the beehive and the colony. Every bee has a part to play. And I just want to encourage that everyone has a role to play in just making sure that it's equitable for everyone. You don't lose anything from it, is my parting words.
Actually, it's appropriate now, Nikki. Bees, Manchester.
Bees, Manchester. I love it. I think the issue of language is really important. I also think if we get the language right, which might change across audiences, this is something the world is waiting for. There is not a single human in the world that doesn't want a better future rooted in values of, well, that's not true. Other events happening aside. A lot of us believe in trust, solidarity, equity, justice. And it's only when we start seeing these things that we realize the system we have doesn't have that. But we all have a choice as individuals and within our organizations. And for some reason, the powers have pushed us into a system of aid that operates through control and with control. But that can be changed, and it is in spaces changing. We desperately need to move from a system based on control to one based on liberation. One that gets funding, power, decision-making to the communities that are facing these issues, that are on the front line of poverty and inequality. That is when we will start seeing long-term change. That is when we will start seeing not just hope, but also outcomes, positive outcomes for next generations, and sustainability, because it's absolutely central. You can't have sustainability without communities that can look after their own environments and natural worlds. So we have a choice. Let's make the right one.
Claire, would you like to add anything to that?
I'm trying to think about the bees now. I do.
Sorry.
No, I can try to make a bridge. I've got young boys, and they love fun facts about animals. And there's a fun fact about animals. Even the bees can count. Bees count because every time they come into the hive, they start to dance. And they actually do a dance, and the others are counting how much they go up. That means how many meters away. And they go left and right, so when they have to turn to go to the flower. So I think that, trying to build the bridge here, I think 1 and 1 is more than 2. And I think going back to, I have a very strong passion about supply chains. All these stories are combined. So if we start to realize what the power of your expenditure, the money you spend, can already contribute to this whole shifting. And there were a lot of, I really recommend to watch the whole documentary. There are a lot of great social entrepreneurs. And sometimes they can only work with a non-profit if they have their non-profit head on. We don't allow them to have a business. And if we see them or can see them more as a business, we can interact with them. And then we can actually channel these funds to our normal procurement decisions. So maybe that's another way to look at it.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Because I don't think it was in that shortcut, but Claire does make some very important points about how aid is delivered through the procurement system, that you can end up destroying lives if you're not careful, because if you take in truckfuls of rice, well, the local rice, and you're giving it away, the local rice farmer's not got much of a future, has he? So it's really important that, Claire's idea of, well, if you're going to deliver rice, go pay the local rice farmer and get him to deliver it. We see lots of examples. Gunj, Andrew Gupta, who you saw in the film, I think when COVID first hit, people were hungry and farmers had food rotting in the fields. So what Gunj did was to mobilize trucks to buy the food. They bought entire crops, didn't they, Alan?
They bought the entire tomato crop in Karnataka because the wholesale markets had just broken.
Yeah. So the farmers ended up doing reasonably well out of COVID, and people got food to eat during COVID, and the whole system kept going. And then when all that ended, the local economies were as robust as they ever were. When we run in to save the world, and you land in your Hercules or your C-130 or whatever, and we're going to, you just end up trampling over people and destroying their lives, which is not what anybody intends at all.
It can even happen from the same organization. So there's large international organizations that do supporting local businesses. And a very key example is a woman being trained to make menstrual hygiene pads locally. There is a proper business case, right? 50% of your population is in scope. So there's a lot of businesses that are set up by the support of great international organizations. But then when a crisis hits, and there's a huge, massive refugee stream coming up, the same organization, different department, starts to procure menstrual hygiene pads as part of their hygiene kits, and they fly them in, whereas their colleagues around the corner have been supporting women around, and then we don't even procure them from these women, and we're setting them out of business instantly because there's no business case for them anymore.
And that's quite ironic when gender equality is supposed to be quite high up on the on mission statements, isn't it? Especially empowering female-started business. So I wonder, does anybody have any questions that you'd like to take advantage of having these amazing people here?
Thank you for the amazing film and the discussion. One thing I wonder about is business models. And we say we don't do charity. What do we do? And Catalyst is actually a network of social entrepreneurship, right? And I love the story of the lady that was hungry, made food, and made the business out of that. And how can we support the business side of things more? I think we need to strengthen that so that people can walk away from charity. And that takes training, that takes upskilling, that takes making that woman, for example, fundable, independent financially of maybe her husband, so she can actually earn money and decide where that money goes, and that other people can invest in her business. All of this capability building, I don't see enough of it. And on the other hand, I see a lot of social entrepreneurs or people in the network go after grants and go after money that they're not even fundable. Like what you were saying, they're not even registered, right? But I'm going to pour 80% of my time that I could spend making money through a business model, right? I'm going to pour that into a grant that I'm not fundable for. And even if I was, the chances of getting a grant are just, as big as playing the lottery sometimes. The odds are very, very small.
That's such a good question. I mean, that right at the very beginning of this process, when I spoke to Ayesha, and Ayesha said, we don't do charity. And that's exactly what I came home to Alan and I said, got a problem here. We're raising money for I don't know what, because apparently charity is a bad thing. What do we call it? What do we do? But you cited the example of the ladies who have their own businesses. That's exactly what SEAL, Isubu Suleimana's operation does. They went in, they looked at what these ladies were doing, saw that it was marketable. SEAL came up with the marketing advice and the funds so that they could take this to market. And I don't think she was in this one, the one with the milk oil. She was even selling. They're right up in the north of Ghana, and her stuff was being shipped down and being sold in Accra, in the capital.
You want to come on?
Did you want to?
I just want to say your tears are very valuable, Alan. You reached the bottom of my heart, truly. And I know what a wonderful person you are. And I just want to say, when I first read about we don't do charity through Catalyst, and I read the comments about it, I thought, I don't want charity as the head of an organization, a small one. And that's why my question in the prior panel was the big organizations, I call them, excuse my language, the big sharks, because they take all the money. And we are facing reality on the ground, and we take, pennies. out of that out of that grant. So yes, you don't do charity. Nobody wants charity, but we want the alternative. And regarding the supply chain, I want to thank you, Claire, for your passion for that. Because think of trucks donated by the International Diabetes Federation full of insulin supplies for the children of Gaza that perished in the desert in Egypt and never got to the people. So when we talk supply chain, we are talking lives if the goods perish in the way. When we are talking medication through the war in Lebanon, we have faced that as well. So supply chain is a major, vital, pivotal role, because when you want to help people, you want the goods to get to them in good shape. And yes, use the local market, use the local farmers, use the local NGOs and help them and empower them to do what needs to be done in their own countries, in their own villages, wherever they are, because they speak the language, they understand the people, they feel what the fear, the anxiety, they live in the same conditions. It's very weird when you bring someone from a totally different context and they come and they, they're at awe at what they are seeing, but they don't understand what is happening. So really, thank you, all of you. Very inspiring, and big thanks to you, Alan. This is a wonderful documentary. Thank you.
Can I just, sorry, can I just add, Jackie, thank you so much. As a former professor in business management and supply chain and logistics, which was part of my previous life, one of my observations about the aid and development sector is that it is almost completely lacking in what I would describe as good management practice. And the point I wanted to make, but I shut up at the time, is that relatively small gains which come from methodologies which are well practiced, like Lean Six Sigma, which is a totally established management practice, those gains can actually make huge incremental improvements. And they seem trivial to people that have no experience of it. So I think, looking at the Catalyst strategy going forward, you speak to training, you speak to OD, there is a huge opportunity as Catalyst moves beyond the incubation phase. It has capacity. There will be enough people that you can engage, that actually you can start to have wonderful conversations across Catalyst and build that body of knowledge so that it's there on the ground.
Okay, so first of all, congratulations and thank you for the film. I think it's a great addition to the narrative building that we require. I would go one step further, and I agree that everything has a role to play. And I think markets have a role to play. But I think we overestimate markets. I think we really need to think of communities and the future of communities. And communities, I believe, from the work I've done in Colombia and in other places, really are not necessarily looking to be part of the markets or the globalized markets especially. They're really looking for ways to become autonomous, to become independent of the markets. So if we keep on thinking of solutions based on markets, we're creating dependencies that are permanent. And I see in many ways markets are a bridge, because we are in a market-driven system that needs to bridge, but also we require bioregional autonomy to create resilient, regenerative livelihoods that are autonomous, where communities see that capital is not the money, but capital is the capacity to create well-being and to create communities of well-being. And that works in a very different dynamic and very different type of transactions. It's no longer the same monetary transactions. It's actually the way we create entanglements within the bioregion that create resilience, capacities, well-being, and all the rest. So I do think that the next step, maybe for chapter 2 of the film, could be really thinking of how communities see themselves creating communities of well-being that can be independent and actually can thrive. And with whatever excess they have within thriving, they can share with others. And in that way, we can create islands of coherence that actually create a thriving world.
I love what you said, and it's very brave of you to come up with that in Davos, of all places. But
that is why I said,
sometimes Amanda and I work very closely together on these things, and we have some more documentaries coming up in the future. And when we're working together, we accuse each other of being Marxist because we're getting more and more tired of the sort of the capitalist environment. And it is. I mean, I have, being a filmmaker, I also have great passion for cultural things in other people's cultures. I'm very interested in African filmmaking and that sort of thing. And that's what we forget when we're doing these things. Firstly, this documentary has had a criticism. It is too much based on the transactional side of things, and I would agree with that. What we can do, we'll make up for it next time. The second thing is, and it's a very important fact, and you've brought it up beautifully, is that we forget that these people that we're trying to help are people, whatever words you want to use, we forget that they're human beings with cultural lives, with social lives, and cultural side to them that you may not understand, but you forget that they're humans. There are other things. Their well-being is what we're really talking about. Not their food, not their shelter, not their it's their well-being and their happiness that we're. And Alan and I had a discussion when we were in India about there's no measure for that, is there? We have.
Sorry, there's Nobel laureates. I mean, this is a known problem. This is a known problem to which the profoundest minds in the world, much greater than anything I can produce, have done the work. So Amartya Sen, Nobel laureate in economics, studied well-being and identified that actually well-being trumps cash the whole time. Banerjee and Duflo, who demonstrated how the poor behave, is completely inconsistent with any Washington, D.C., Beltway. There's some cuts in there. Jonathan Glennie called the people that control the entire industry the Beltway bandits. That got taken out. But this is a known problem. Rumsfeldian, it's a known. And yet the world has not moved. So I just feel that it's an opportunity to maybe just shame some people who live in those ivory towers. And if it's too transactional, we'll have another go if we can find some money.
Okay, I think.
Sorry.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Thank you so much for the thoughtful discussion. I work as part of a strategic communications lab that's focused on influencing commitments to overseas development assistance across the UK and across Europe. We're doing that whilst grappling with how broken that system is and what that looks like. But I'm interested in your view on how we meet the reality of politics, and so what's needed from governments, and in particular donor governments that are based in the global north, to drive change.
Nikki,
the big question.
Can I start with a really quick question? There's a reason we decided to not look there and start again and build a new system, because honestly, it's a lost cause. The world that we are in is going in the wrong direction, wherever you look. The people that have the power to change things are when we come together and we say, you know what? We know there's a better system out there and we have a part to play in building it. I don't think it's going to be the governments that's going to take us in the right direction. It's going to be us together.
Hey everyone, my name is Gosbert Chigula. I've actually come in from Ghana, where we have a venture hub and a fund where we're investing in startups tackling the climate emergency across West Africa. And I agree with the premise of we don't do charity. And granted, I didn't see the documentary. I arrived a bit late. But I also know the reality of raising a commercial fund seeking commercial returns in Africa. There's one uncomfortable truth that it's easy for me as someone who grew up in Europe, but being based in Africa, to raise a commercial fund. And my business partner, who's running around here somewhere, it's we've been doing this for a year and a half, and it's unmistakable. My accent, my mannerisms seem to get us into the room. Secondly, that there is no market. There is a very tiny market for commercial funds seeking commercial returns in Africa, just generally. And there's a lot of uncomfortable conversations about, if you look at the top funds, look at the composition of those funds. So as much as I dislike the idea of charity, I recognize there is a convenience, and to talk to the point you raised there, that donor governments, there is a convenience for them to give as opposed to seek anything more. And I also feel that social entrepreneurs fall into, and I'm only going to speak about Africa here because it's been my place of focus. There's a bucket they fall into which sits between this kind of commerciality and kind of charitable giving. And I wonder, what is that next step? Where the economic reality, the system that we sit in, it is what it is, and I totally get what you're saying. Let's burn it down and start again. But at the moment, I'm raising a fund, so I need something to grab onto in the meantime. Give me a life raft or something. Where is that middle ground, which links to politics, which links to a bigger... If I look at donors, you're talking at LPs, there's a whole system which is reinforcing the challenges we meet, and I wonder, what is that next step? Sorry.
If you're based in Accra, yes, you need to speak to Charles Kojo Van Dyke. He was in the documentary, runs an organisation called WAXI, West African
Civil Society
Institute, and he'll guide you. And he's a banker.
And also have a listen to the session that was on earlier this afternoon about next generation financing models, where there were a lot of kind of people with the power and the money to invest talking about new ways of doing things. So they might be well placed to.
And I'd just add that those people would be very willing to engage with Catalyst, provided Catalyst can embed the skills. So the discussion I had with the gentleman who led the panel after the session made it very clear that the subtlety of the model, depending on whether you're in Ghana or Mozambique or Malaysia or Lebanon, you need to be able to factor that in, but actually you can get commercial finance into those solutions, but you also may need some seed capital.
Mm-hmm. Also, an underrated actor, the diaspora. You know, they're channeling money, they're funding, money into countries that they've come from that surpasses government money, but are often undervalued and underestimated. So there's power there.
That was one answer I had for you. Is I think we're not tapping in. We're thinking a lot about serving the community. We're not tapping into the community as much to raise funds, to commercialize. Okay, there's always this object, we need to serve this community, right? But the ecosystem, so also the point about governments, yes, but local governments, if you can localize this in an ecosystem, if you can make it specific to a community, if you can bring in money from wealthy people that have a vested interest in that fund, then you will get that funded.
Okay. I think we need to wrap up, but
it will be fast.
You've been waiting,
really fast. So in Compromiso Bogotá, we have thought.
The last one.
Yeah, we have thought a lot about how to shift the power, and we see in the philosophy of pay it forward, a very good way to go, because the needs of the community are so big that they do need the seed capital. But we think that this seed capital should be with pay it forward, because that way, and that's what, for example, what the U community does all over the world. They receive you and you pay it forward. It really works.
Thank you very much. Right, well, thanks so much for sticking with us, especially when one of our own panel went. But thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Sorry,